first, let me remind folks, this is part of our series on Inside City Hall, where we bring key city leaders out to District 10 virtually for now to tell us a little bit about their jobs and help us understand how the city works, to solve the problems that residents are concerned about. And then we open it up to Q&A from the audience. So with that intro, Olympia, thanks again for joining us. And would you mind telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do at City Hall?
Definitely. So first, I'd like to thank you, Councilmember Mahan, and all of the residents here in District 10. As I was telling people before we started, District 10 has a special place in my heart because the first job I got with the city was at the old Almaden Community Center as a recreation program specialist. So I know this district well and still have a lot of engagement with neighborhoods and resident leaders in the area. As the council member said, my name is Olympia Williams and I manage the city's Beautify SJ program. And that is really our blight reduction and beautification strategy. Some of the programs that are within Beautify SJ are our anti-litter program, our anti-graffiti program, neighborhood beautification, or kind of our dumpster day programs, as well as illegal dumping, and the Neighborhoods Commission. And I mention that because under the Beautify SJ strategy, we really look at what we could do to improve the quality of life and neighborhood livability. Two programs that we've really launched as we started to notice that blight was increasing across our city is what we call our encampment trash program. That's really about managing trash at encampments. And then we have a cash for trash program that also is another tool that we use to really manage that visible blight that we often see at encampments. But the most important thing that we get to do as part of the Beautify SJ strategy is work with our volunteers. As many of you know, we have about 23,000 volunteers. They give over 55,000 hours of volunteer service every year. And for us as a small program, I like to remind you that California values a volunteer hour at $29.09 per hour. So that's a substantial add to our program.
That's excellent. Thanks, Olympia. That's quite an overview. You guys have a lot on your plate. Tell us a little more about the structure of the staff, and you mentioned volunteers. And so how does it all work? If a resident reaches out and is concerned about blight, for example, what happens? They might report it on 311. Does that come to your team?
So it does. So there's a multitude of different ways people report blight to us. And I tell people we take it and we have kind of no wrong way to get information to us. People can report it through SJ 311. You can call our office. For graffiti, we have a 24-hour hotline because our city council has given me the authority to go ahead and remove any graffiti that's gang graffiti or offensive or hate speech within 24 hours. I say that because we abate 2.2 million square feet of graffiti across the city of San Jose, with about 300,000 square feet of that, believe it or not, in Council District 10. But what's unique about our graffiti is about 30% of it is gang or hate speech, where you usually find most large cities at about 20%. The challenge for us is we truly run out of money at 2.2 million square feet. And I strategically have to manage what comes down and what may have to wait a little bit longer. But I tell people, use the app. You can call us, you can email us, and believe it or not, a lot of folks will tag me in Facebook posts. So I'm friends with most neighborhood associations. People will tag me, so I know about it. And those things just become reports that my team will address.
That's awesome. We've also tried to make our office multi-channel, so we get a lot of feedback via Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, in addition to email and phone calls. So it's great to hear you're doing that. And just to repeat that stat, I actually did not know, you said over 300,000 square feet of graffiti just in District 10 every year. And then
District 10, yep, the last couple of years, we've started to see things creep up. So like I said, our goal is to get that hate speech and gang graffiti down really quickly. And all other graffiti, our goal is to get it down within 72 hours. Our program gets about 85% of graffiti down within about 36 hours. And that's just, I like to remind people, in the city jurisdiction. There's another 1.5 million square feet of graffiti that's on all of our interjurisdictional partners, the freeways, Valley Water, the county, that we also work with to coordinate, including private businesses and unfortunately residential homeowners.
Wow, yeah, that's an incredible workload. And is that all the team that you manage, or do volunteers get involved in graffiti abatement?
We do. We have volunteers that get involved with us to help us with graffiti abatement. Typically, if we have a person that lives close to, let's say, a sound wall or at the end of the street, they have something like that, they tend to work with us and we provide custom paint so people can help us. And our volunteers also help us with litter. All of our neighborhoods or, associations help us with litter pickups, or we give out free litter kits every year, about 1,000 of them. And we tell people they can just keep the litter and trash in front of their own home clean. That goes a long way with getting other folks to kind of step up and do the same thing.
Absolutely. Olympia, you might not know this, but we have an informal working group in District 10 that's resident led, that's focused on beautification and anti-litter. And so we'll have to connect you guys. I think they'd really enjoy
definitely
hearing more from your team. Yeah. And I think we've been kicking around this idea of trying to get District 10 residents to adopt their own street and basically go street by street and just really have a grassroots effort to try to keep our community clean and beautiful. So, and we'll put, you mentioned a bunch of different resources earlier, so we'll put some of those in the comments for folks and different ways that they can reach you and get involved. You mentioned in your intro about what you do, you mentioned encampments, and I think many of us have noticed the proliferation of encampments, particularly during COVID. It's been, incredibly sad to see the growth in our unhoused population. And a lot of the feedback we get is that I think, most residents are quite empathetic toward our unhoused neighbors and understand how tough their lives are. I think what we hear often, though, is what are we doing to manage the impact of encampments on the community and better conditions for the people who are living in those encampments. So I know that's a big problem, and you're not responsible for all of that, but can you tell us a little bit about how you approach encampment cleanup and maybe how it's changed with COVID?
Definitely. So as many of you know, prior to COVID, we did a lot of what we call the old abatement program. We go in, we break down the encampment, and the person would come back really quickly. When COVID hit and we went into the shelter in place, we also had to have our unhoused community. For many of you who don't know, we have over 5,000 people every night in our community living in every place you can imagine, along our creeks, in our parks, oftentimes on our streets and sidewalks, along a trail, and many other areas. In the city of San Jose, we have over 220 encampments that we have mapped. They consist of everything from 1 to 2 people to 50, and an encampment we have that has a few hundred people. During shelter in place, we suspended the encampment abatement program, but knew we had to do something to address the trash. We started to develop and launch very quickly what we call an encampment trash program, with the goal of going to every encampment at least every other week to pick up trash, the same way we have trash service. I will tell you, it continues to be a challenge. But the good thing for us is that council was able to appropriate the funds we need so we can get in and quickly learn, launch programs, iterate, and make additional adjustments for effectiveness and efficiency. So with that said, we have the districts in three different zones throughout the city of San Jose, with Council District 10 really being in our southwest zone. Most of the encampments there get service on a regular basis every other week, with some encampments that we have a lot of trash and debris at, well, we service those encampments once a week. What we typically do is coordinate. I tell people the Beautify team takes care of that visual blight, the trash, biohazards, maybe a bit of vehicles that people are living in. And then we work closely with our housing partners who take care of the social services aspect. Quite honestly, it's typically the Beautify team that knows people very well, and they do what we call a warm handoff to our outreach services that people can seek those other services, mainly focused towards shelter and housing.
Got it. Okay. And so we're only doing abatement right now if there's a clear public health or public kind of public risk, right? If there's a danger of some kind.
Yes. So I like to tell people that council gave us the direction to suspend the abatement program, with the exception of we don't want people to encamp on the sidewalks, on ramps, off ramps, in a park median attached to some type of facility, including residential property, or on the physical trail. Right. Knowing that, we do go in and abate if we find that people have encamped in those areas, or if the police department, quite honestly, has determined that there are too many other safety risks at that encampment. We'll start to work with those people to find a new location that people can encamp with. I'd also like to add that this has become such a, this isn't just a priority for your council member, but as many of you know, Councilmember Mahan moved forward a memo that was adopted and made this one of the #1 items on our city roadmap. So we're already formulating a team that we'll be developing what we call an encampment management strategy. We've heard clearly from council and we've heard clearly from our residents, and that's something that is a priority for our staff to address.
Thanks, Olympia. Yeah, it is a priority, and I'm so glad to know you're focused on it. And I love that you're very focused on impact, which I think is what our residents want to hear. And so you mentioned with graffiti, you had some great stats. I'm curious, when you think about managing encampments, I know this is an evolution. We're kind of in that conversation right now, but as your team thinks about how it measures success, what are the metrics you use, or how do you what do you use as the manager of the program each week to know if you're being successful, or if you need more support from council, for example?
Definitely. So some of the things we look at, quite honestly, are the same things our residents see. It's just the trash. Is there trash strewn all about? Is there a lot of other debris at an encampment? We understand that people at this time without shelter are living outdoors, but we want people to confine their belongings and their living space to about a 12 by 12 and to have no visible trash outside of their living structure. So when we start to see that, our team will use a tool called an escalated cleanup, which means we'll go in and say, hey, you have too much, your area is grown from like a 12 by 12 to like a 30 by 60. And we really work with people to scale that back so it can be in a smaller area. And we also really work hard to get people into a shelter or in an area that doesn't have as much impact. Our homeless population also recognizes that oftentimes they are not in the best areas, and they're just trying to find a better area that they can receive those services. Something else I'd like to add is that our housing partners, in coordination with Beautify SJ, has launched a SOAR program. What that is council has provided the necessary resources to take those largest encampments, a lot of them along creeks and a lot of them along our trails, and provide intensive services, more trash pickup. You'll see additional dumpsters at these areas, more outreach and mental health services to really try to move people into some type of transitional housing and shelter.
Absolutely. And that was really the idea behind the encampment management proposal that I put forward last month, which is just that, the reality is we have over 6,000 people living on our streets in San Jose every single day, and there's no easy solution. But while we're trying to identify longer term solutions like building more affordable housing, finding more placements for mental health and substance abuse treatment, and trying to help people get the skills and the jobs that they need and everything else to help people move out of that condition, we also have to, in my opinion at least, invest in managing the reality on the ground today, which affects everyone. It's bad, the lack of services and support is bad for people living on the streets, of course, but it's also it's tough on the whole community. And it's something that we certainly hear about every single day in the District 10 office. So, beyond encampments, and you touched on this before, but we hear a lot about what people call blight. And, that might be illegal dumping is something you referenced, somebody dropping it could be a couch or just trash on the side of the road, or, weeds, for example, and that may, maybe an overgrown lot, which may or may not fall under your purview. I'd be interested to know. It probably depends on exactly where that lot is. But how does your team basically tackle the wide range of beautification and blight related concerns that we hear about?
Definitely. So what I tell people is that oftentimes any blight issues will come to the Beautify team, or my team is usually out. Believe it or not, at this time, we're running a 7-day-a-week operation. This past weekend, the teams collected over 43,000 pounds of trash, just of trash, So we know that we have some internal work to do, because a lot of that comes from us as housed members of the community that also impacts kind of just the overall visual blight of our city. So if there's an abandoned vehicle, and I tell people, and they reported it through San Jose 311 and it's stuck. It's like, we reported it, it's been 2 months. People can usually email us at beautifysj@sanjoseca.gov. And what happens is it comes to me, I assign a staff member, and we work to get it unstuck in the system. If someone says, Olympia, someone's moved into the neighborhood and they're living in the vehicle and the trash is everywhere, that usually comes in through us, and we coordinate with a multitude of intra-departmental networks and systems, as well as interdepartmental, all of our other interjurisdictional partners. You see graffiti on a freeway sign, it usually comes to my team, and they coordinate directly with CalTrans. There's trash or debris on the off ramps and on ramps, especially at that 85 in Almadale. We've cleaned it several times. That property is city, CalTrans, and Valley Water. So we lead the coordination and go in and clean up a lot of those areas so we could address it. So I encourage people, use the systems that we have in place, which is our SJ 311 app, but also reach out to us when you see things are stuck in the systems. I tell people, part of our blight and beautification strategy really falls under the city's neighborhood services. I live in this city. I grew up in this city. I went to school in this city. I own a home in this city, and I have a vested interest in this city being clean. I have the same frustrations that everyone has when you drive by and you're just like, I can't believe there's another couch or there's something here. Why is someone living in this spot? I'm in the same boat along with everyone else. So those are the kind of things that I want people to feel free to reach out to us. I can coordinate those various different places for residents so they don't have to make 5 phone calls. With that said, something we're really working hard to do is to better kind of leverage efficiencies internal. So we're shifting programs out of other departments under the Beautify SJ umbrella so we can better get those efficiencies. I have a team now that when they do a neighborhood cleanup, they'll do a dumpster day, proactive illegal dumping, take care of all the vehicles that are abandoned, as well as do graffiti. And we work with those by working with different council offices to figure out what the needs are in the community, or neighborhoods just reach out to us and say, look, we need some type of beautification strategy. The last thing I want to mention, I'm sure many of you know, our Beautify SJ neighborhood grants will be coming back online in the next fiscal year, which will begin July 1st. And I encourage every neighborhood out there to apply and get a grant to do some neighborhood beautification. But more importantly, you can use those grant funds to build those strong relationships in a neighborhood. I tell people beautiful neighborhoods start with neighbors that know each other. Right. We all know each other, and Matt's at the corner dumping couches out front. There's enough of us to talk to him to say, hey, we need you to use a different way to get rid of that couch, and sitting it out on the street is not what we want you to do. And that really helps.
That's right. No, it's such a great point. I know there's a lot of research out there that shows that when people know their neighbors and they build community, they have safer neighborhoods and more beautiful neighborhoods and better life outcomes overall. So it's a great point that you're making there. And we will be sure through our office to advertise those grants and make sure the community is aware of how to apply and how to carry out those projects. That's a great segue to my next question. But before I ask it, just want to remind folks of that email. We'll put it in the chat. It's in the chat, but it's beautifysj@sanjoseca.gov. And that's in addition to the 311 app, which for your kind of everyday reporting is probably the best place to start, right?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, good. I know it's not your department, but I helped my neighbor submit a request to the San Jose 311 app just a few days ago, and within less than 24 hours, DOT was out filling a pothole. So I was very proud to see that level of responsiveness, and I know your team strives to do that as well. So I want to talk a little bit. You've been mentioning community engagement and neighbors getting to know one another. Any other advice for people about how to get involved or what they can do to have a cleaner, more beautiful city?
Definitely. So there's a couple of things I tell people. All residents who are on this call should make sure that they are engaged with their council office. I tell people oftentimes things get stuck in the system, but when a council member's office is reaching out, you kind of figure out what's going on. It's just a good way. And it's also a good way to loop in your council member. So when I go to council and say, I need X, Y, and Z resources, Councilmember Mahan says, people in my community have been talking about X, Y, and Z. They want more trees planted. And you're right, we need those things done. So those two things really help get the resources that we need in neighborhoods. I tell people, get to know your neighbors, join your neighborhood association. If you don't have a neighborhood association, work with your council office to form a neighborhood association. The best way to improve your quality of life in a neighborhood, believe it or not, is strong neighborhoods. I've done this for a large part of my career, is working to engage with residents. I tell people, whether it's a working class neighborhood or the most affluent neighborhood, people tend to have the exact same complaints. They don't change. People think they do, but they don't. But one of the ways that you're able to combat that is get people engaged. A lot of our neighborhood associations, I depend on them. They'll do a once a month litter pickup. 20 people for 1 hour taking care of your park makes all the difference in having those public spaces that are close to neighborhoods. Talking about public litter cans or reaching out. If you're like Olympia, we have a corner that can benefit from a public litter can because we're close to the high school. Reach out because we also can coordinate those types of things. But that's the number one thing, is getting involved, getting engaged, finding out about your district leadership group and letting them know the types of issues that you're seeing. We have a pretty well organized and strong neighborhoods commission, and once a year they write a letter to the council, and I can tell you 80–90% of the time, a multitude of those things, council will say, yeah, we need to have this funded. We need to address abandoned vehicles, because council members are also seeing the exact same things that we see. They see the quality of life issues and the couch on the corner, and we got to do something about the trash at the encampment. And why have the trees not been addressed in years at this particular location? So they can really advocate for those resources that a community needs.
That's a great answer. And I was hoping you were going to mention the neighborhood commission, because I know you're the staff liaison to the commission.
I am the staff
right?
liaison to the commission.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're our appointed council member. So it really helps having people engaged.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. I'm glad the mayor appointed me to be the liaison from council to the neighborhood commission. I think it's a great group. And you're right. People bring up the issues that are the same issues I heard when I was out campaigning and knocking on doors. I mean, it's the immediate issues, anything from package theft to potholes to graffiti to the tree that's died and nobody's removed to, I mean, that's the stuff you see and that affects how you feel about your neighborhood. And I think we all want to take pride in our community. So you're right, getting involved is really, really important. And I'll mention our office is, we'll put our email, our District 10 email in the chat as well, which is just district10@sanjoseca.gov. We're making a concerted effort with the District 10 Leadership Coalition to form neighborhood associations in partnership with neighbors across the district who are not currently represented by a neighborhood association. So if you are not a part of or are not aware of a neighborhood association in your neighborhood, we would love to hear from you. Michelle Dexter on our team is heading up that work. And our goal is to ensure that every resident in District 10 has an active neighborhood association that they can participate in and serve their community through. So that's a big push for us. I think we're going to start shifting to audience questions. But Olympia, I want to thank you again for joining us, but also just for your vision, your energy, and just the hard work you do every day to serve the residents of our city. I see it and hear it every time I see you speak, and it gives me a lot of energy, and I just really appreciate it.
Thank you. You guys know I love this work. I tell most people that know this, I'm a biochemist by trade,
Right.
But this is where I found my passion. So I definitely enjoy the work and love working with community.
That's awesome. Do you get to use your biochemistry?
Every now and then I still tutor kids. We do these competitions and we tutor kids getting ready for the AP exam, but it's not as enjoyable working in a lab as it is working with people. That I will tell you.
Oh, I believe that. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So why don't let's move over to the Q&A here, and people have been asking questions. So the first one is a question about how your office works with private volunteer groups such as Trash Punks, which is a successful local organization. And are there funds allocated to your budget that are used to basically support those private volunteer organizations as they go about their work?
Definitely. So we have Trash Punks with Justin Imamura, great organization. Really started and launched simply because they were seeing the trash and blight in our community and thought to do something about it. So there's two ways that organizations can go about getting money from the city. There's a process during the budget called the BD process, where council members submit BDs and will often target funds specifically for a private volunteer organization, or there are other grants that they can receive. I don't have any specific grants for organizations in my budget, but they are in another department's budget. So such as our Creek volunteer organizations, they get funded by the city. And then over on my side, my staff does all of the staff and resource work to help out with those, where it's helping to organize volunteers, supporting the trash pickup and providing all of the supplies. And I get that side of the budget, and we just work together to address those things.
Great. Thanks, Olympia. The next question is multifaceted, but I'll summarize it as being about vehicle abatement, and specifically the gray area around vehicles that are not being towed, maybe because they are not extremely blighted, is maybe the way that it's written here. So not, they're up on blocks, maybe they have a flat tire, but they've been sitting there for a long time, and maybe there's a question about whether or not they should be abated. Or there's another example here is the expired tags are over a year, but it still isn't being towed. So I guess, could you just share a little bit about where the city is on abandoned vehicle abatement or just dilapidated vehicles and where that line is?
Yes. So I will tell you, I'm not an expert in our abandoned vehicles, but if you want to email me, and especially if vehicles are on blocks, that to the city is a priority, and they will come out and remove those. Any vehicle on blocks is just seen as a danger. So please send those directly to me. If a vehicle is on the street, and let's say the tags haven't been renewed in maybe a year, the city's been giving a little leeway because of the pandemic. My understanding though is they will come out, look at the vehicle and tag it to say, hey, it needs to be moved within 72 hours, or you need to get tags, or we're going to have to tow it. So our vehicle abatement is doing the work. They have gone back to towing vehicles, posting people and giving them notification. There are particular things that are in the law that will see if they'll let you determine if it's a blighted vehicle. If I park my car and it's on flat overnight and I move it in 2 days, I'm okay. But if it's been sitting there for 2 or 3 months, if you email me, I can work directly with my colleague over in abandoned vehicles, and pictures always help. So they know exactly what they're dealing with. And usually we can look at it and say, yeah, that needs to be removed. So please send those directly to me and I can coordinate any issues that are being had with those.
Great, thanks for that. And I imagine there's a backlog from COVID, or am I wrong about that?
There is a backlog from COVID for a multitude of things. As many of you can imagine, we've had to kind of readjust how we do work and how we get work done. You know, there was a point when I had staff working that I couldn't have 2 people in the vehicles, and the city couldn't find a place to rent enough fleet because so many cities had to do that. So we've all been going through this transition, but finding now that vaccines have started to roll out and we know more about coronavirus, we've been able to make other modifications. So a lot of us are catching up, and I know vehicle abatement has been one of those things. As you can imagine, it was initially suspended as people were sheltering in place. So it was hard to tow someone's vehicle if it was parked in the same place for 3 days. But I know now vehicle abatement is back on track, and they've started to do the work of noticing vehicles and towing.
Great. Okay, that's good to know. And just a reminder to folks, we have 11 questions. We've gone through a couple here, but just use that Q&A button down at the bottom if you want to ask a question, and I'll kind of continue moderating here. So we have another one about encampments right beside mobile home parks and the risk of fire, which is quite severe with a mobile home. And so are there any particular steps we're taking to protect mobile home parks?
You know, for us, an encampment in any area that can be a danger or a safety threat, I ask that they can email that to me as well at our Beautify SJ email address, because we like to know where those are. We really try to work with folks to have them pick another place just due to that safety issue, because we have had a couple fires close to mobile home parks. So that is on our priority list. Okay, I'm glad to hear you're aware of that. And again, if people have specific concerns, there's kind of the broad tool for just reporting things, which is San Jose 311. But if they need more specific help, Beautify SJ at sanjoseca.gov. And again, we'll make sure that's in the chat for folks. Okay, so let's see. David says, I used to take care of graffiti myself before the city got more efficient with 311 services. So I've been sending in the calls the last few years, but as a volunteer, I could offload staff by taking care of it myself. How do I go about getting my city gray paint these days? Oh, I am glad to hear that, because as you can imagine, our graffiti budget is always stretched to the max. So if you want to reach out and let us know, I will be sure to have staff bring you some city gray. What we'll do in our system is know, David, that you take care of a specific area and that will only come out if you contact us. Thank you so much for that. That's great. Thanks, David. Appreciate all your volunteerism in D10 and beyond. We really do. We have a couple different questions here about your work with CalTrans. And I know there's a lot of frustration with CalTrans. And maybe you could tell us, we could zoom out for a moment. You can tell us a little bit about what land in the city, generally speaking, is CalTrans land, and how do you work with them? And who has authority, who ultimately has decision-making authority? How does your relationship with them operate? Definitely. So this is a very good question, and it's somewhat simplistic and complicated. So as you know, CalTrans basically owns, in their jurisdiction, is all of the freeways, most off-ramps and on-ramps, some roundabouts, some not. But I will tell you, over the last 60 years, and yes, there are times that we are still under an operational agreement from 1941, right? Wow. That we are still looking at where the city may have operational responsibility. And it has been extremely frustrating. A little background on CalTrans. Their they have a struggle because people that, let's say, are in another part of the state or inland where it's much cheaper to live make the exact same amount as you make in our district. We're in CalTrans District 4. So they hire people, they get them trained in 6 months, and one day they transfer because they can't afford to live here. So we've been working on that and really working with the mayor's office to say, what can you do at the state level to say maybe there needs to be some difference in pay depending on where you are. So number one, that's the challenge, is that CalTrans doesn't have enough staff to really address the issues that we have here in San Jose. Second, if you ever drive our freeways, you'll notice that San Jose, when it was laid out, we have a lot more land next to our freeways. You go to San Francisco, you're like, the only thing there is the rail, or, there's concrete. Yeah. San Jose, just because the natural layout of our city when they developed, we have a lot more land along our freeways, off-ramps and on-ramps. That allows for a lot more dumping, encampments, fires, trash, litter, everything you can imagine. What we've really done over the past year is really honed in and have started to work with CalTrans. I meet with them in a team every other week, and what we do is outline areas that need to be addressed. CalTrans the last 6 months has been much more responsive. So what they're focusing on now are encampments and dumping along the freeway. I will tell you, they cannot remove an encampment unless they get permission from their Office of Emergency Services in Sacramento. So I usually put a long list of encampments on our freeways together. As soon as they clear one, I put it back on the list because I know someone's going to come back. So we keep going through this kind of back and forth, abate, people come back, we clear it, someone's dumped, etc. So really working on those type of things. Our next challenge is that the people who do the vegetation management, the encampment, and all the dumping is a different team that takes care of our signs. So we have a couple signs in the city of San Jose that have been so graffitied over that you can't even read it, right? So we're really pushing and saying we need a faster response, because 12 months to me is too long, right? Yep. For a sign, it's just too long. Same thing with trash. So we're really working closely with CalTrans. They've started to address the 101 corridor and they've got it looking better. Now they're going to switch over to 680, 280, 87, 85. But I know that when they do that, we're going to see 101 start to, get a few more encampments and trash. It's a challenge, and it's something that we continue to work on. Like I said, we're meeting with them every other week. I was giving council direction to make that a priority, and that's what I've continued to do.
That's great. No, I appreciate you doing that. And I guess, it sounds like there's both a resource investment issue from the state, and then there's also just processes that are very slow and cumbersome. If residents want to have an impact on that state level funding and regulation, I assume they should talk to their assembly member or state senator. Is that right? Would you go to the state legislature?
Yep. And I would say to include you in that as well. I would say to reach out to their state assembly member, the legislature, and include you as well, because that goes a long way. A couple years ago, we had a campaign where people were really pressing the council and the mayor. And believe it or not, the mayor was able to get the state to put an additional $10 million in investment. You think it looks bad today? 3 years ago, it was horrible, but that money has since run out. So, I've been pushing for it, but it's like now we need another push with the residents to help us get those funds back in our district, because I too am frustrated that I drive one city over. I'm like, wait, it looks different than where we are, 2 exits down. So I completely understand. And it is one of my priorities, working with both Union Pacific, CalTrans, and Valley Water. Those are like my priority partners that we work with to address the blight and encampments and other issues on their property.
And yeah, thank you. And do you find those other agencies you mentioned, Union Pacific, I know there's a long history there, and then Valley Water, do you find, do you have pretty good access to them, and are they fairly responsive? I understand sometimes it's just resource constraints, and in the example of CalTrans, it also just sounds like some of these processes are too slow, but tell us a little bit about some of these other agencies that you have to partner with.
So we work with Union Pacific Railroad, and I will tell you, it took us a long time to establish a good working relationship. But I think, for me, I'm committed to putting in that time. And what we've done with Union Pacific Railroad is there was a time we could barely get them to respond to our call. Now we've formed a partnership, and they come to San Jose, believe it or not, every month. Like I've had to ask them sometimes, hey, we don't have the resources to support any efforts, but they've been coming to our city on a regular basis, and you've noticed that the rail line is getting cleaner and cleaner. They're dealing with the same issues we do. They come 1 month, abate people, and come back and abate. The reason we have to work so closely with our partners, especially around homelessness, as you can imagine, when Union Pacific needs to move, 100 people off their property, they come onto the city jurisdiction. And oftentimes folks may look for an encampment on a sidewalk, right next to a business, maybe attach their encampment to someone's home. So we need to work closely with them so we can collaborate and help folks as they're looking for a place to say, you might want to take shelter. So it's something we do. It's the same thing we do with Valley Water. I will tell you, we're working closely, but as most of you can imagine, out of those 6,000 homeless folks, a significant portion live along our watershed, right? So we're looking at what long-term strategy are we going to need to put in place where we deal with both the housing aspect, the cleanup, and the restoration of our creeks.
Absolutely. And to your point, I mean, abatement is just, it's like whack-a-mole. So, I mean, it just does it. We're just shuffling people around. And I understand why residents call for abatement, but it's often literally moving someone down the street and then they're back it's not actually improving things for anyone. And so that's why, I've tried to emphasize getting more service delivery. So trash removal, porta potties, caseworkers, and then to the extent that we have shelter or other services available, making sure that we're getting as many people through that pipeline as possible. Let's shift gears a little bit, and we're going to start winding down here, but I do want to get to a few more questions. We had another one come in from Michelle asking if your department works with retail outlets to clean up parking lots and areas around commercial districts.
So we don't work directly with commercial businesses. What happens is something comes into us and it needs to be addressed. Let's say it's graffiti and people just don't take the graffiti down within a certain amount of time. We'll send them the code and that'll usually make them move. But 99% of the businesses will take down the graffiti. Now, the dumping and trash is another issue. And we usually have to work with code to address that because oftentimes businesses are telling us, look, we close at night. The same thing we experience in the city. People drive over and they dump an old water heater or refrigerator, and we're left to get rid of it. And they're oftentimes scrambling to find someone to address those things. So when it usually comes to retail shopping centers and any issues that they don't address, and we're willing to work with them, but if they don't, we usually have to go through code. I will tell you that a lot of our business associations and retail centers also adopt areas in front of their businesses, and they'll just take care of the litter for us. They'll do an annual, cleanup or a monthly cleanup. 7-Elevens throughout our city of San Jose are really good about that. They sponsor cleanups, and during the summer, most kids know if they pick up litter, they can just go in a 7-Eleven and get a free Slurpee. So it tends to be very popular. So those are the kind of businesses that we do look to establish relationships with. And then quite honestly, there's some that we have to send the code to be able to address the issues.
Great, that makes sense. And we've had some outreach to our office about a few retail zones in our district. And I'd encourage folks to email us at district10@sanjoseca.gov if there's a particular shopping center or other retail establishment where you'd like us to focus. Because I think, to Olympia's point, if we can get the business owner engaged and get them to manage the issue up front, that's a lot better than sending code enforcement out. But that's the alternative, which we can certainly pursue as appropriate. Let's see here. We have a question from District 3. All right. So we're getting people from all over the city. I love it. Wondering if your work on cleaning up homeless encampments, I think is what we're talking about here, extends to the downtown core. And I know we have downtown streets team. Do you work with them?
We do. So we address encampments throughout the city. So any place that people in any part of the city, someone called the other day, there was a person living in an RV in New Almaden, all the way out to El Viso, to the city council district 5 line in the Alum Hills, all the way out to the Saratoga line. So wherever there's an encampment on city jurisdiction, we address all of those issues. There's also a special group working downtown because we have I tell people Districts 3, District 7, they tend to have the largest number of folks who are homeless because they have a lot of open space. They have a lot of parkland, and that trails areas are very popular for folks who are unhoused at this time to live. That's right.
And Sheila, who asked the question, actually mentioned the Guadalupe Creek Park, which is obviously I've walked through there many times over the last few years, and it's concerning. I mean, there's a lot of tents, a lot of trash, and the Port Creek is in dire straits, it seems. But anything else on that front? I assume you mentioned that you do the regular trash pickup at encampments. And what was the number of encampments that you've identified?
We have over 220 encampments throughout the city.
Okay, so over 220. And again, if people identify something when they're out on a walk that they don't feel like is being taken care of, 311 or BeautifySJ at sanjoseca.gov. I'm just going to keep repeating that because we need residents out there to supply us with good information. Great. Okay, let's see here. I didn't get a chance to tee up my next question. I'm sorry. Let's see here. Anything else I haven't asked you as I look through these questions quickly?
So something I like to remind people of is that, you know, I say we're always privileged to have 1 million residents because that means we have 2 million eyes. I tell people, if you see something, reach out to a city department, even if you don't, even if it's not the correct department. People will reach out to us and say the street lights are out. We'll just coordinate that with DOT. But I tell you, a lot of folks that work on blight throughout the city, we are committed to this kind of work. You know, we love going into neighborhoods and getting things cleaned up. We like when we go in a neighborhood, we're like, we towed out 20 vehicles. Because then I say, why do we have 20 inoperable vehicles here in the first place? That tells me we need to do more education on the front end. When I start to see a lot of dumping throughout the city, and I will tell you, we had areas where there used to be a lot of dumping, and then something weird happened during COVID, and now there's no area that's spared of something being dumped out or sat out alongside the road. I like to remind people that we have a free junk pickup program that council funds now, and it's unlimited. Like you can get 30 items picked up at once and you can use it as often as you like. And you can go right to the website or on the SJ311 app now and schedule your pickup, right? So I encourage folks that, you know, a lot of what we see around trash and debris, you know, we may attribute it to the homeless, but what I can tell you is a lot of homeless people do not have water heaters, sewing machines, you know, a refrigerator, a Viking stove, I mean, just everything you can imagine. Those things come from us who are housed members of the community who don't know how to appropriately get rid of something through the free junk pickup, or someone calls and says, oh, Matt, you need to get rid of 6 couches. I can do it for 25 bucks. They cannot do it for 25 bucks.
No,
you know, so
that's not making it to the landfill. Yeah, that's not making it to the landfill. That's the problem we have.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. The free junk pickup is a great service, and we're going to keep advertising it here in District 10. Atif had a question about a boundary wall behind Pioneer High School. So that's a specific school here in our district, obviously. And, you know, I'm curious, he thinks it may be City of San Jose land. I suspect it could be Valley Water land as well, but that I believe
it's back there by the creek, Pioneer High School, right by Hoffman Viamonte in the park over there. So if you email me, I think I know the area you're speaking about. I believe that's on Valley Water property, but the city coordinates closely with Valley Water because we have a maintenance agreement in that area. So if you could send me an email that tell me exactly what the area is and your concern, I can have someone follow up on that. Okay, great. And you have an arrangement with Valley Water where you can coordinate who's going to clean it up, make sure it gets done. All right, Atif. So there you go. Just email Olympia, BeautifySJ at sanjoseca.gov. Okay, last couple questions here. Would a homeless encampment with fires and drug use and located in a neighborhood reach the level of abatement that's required at this point, basically? Yes. Yes. Okay. When you have those kind of issues, so there's 2 things we look at. We look at behaviors. You know, my team's pretty well versed at working with a lot of folks, and they'll go out a lot of times and they'll just tell me, yeah, behaviors that are occurring here are impacting a neighborhood. And those are the kind of things I like to know, because I move quickly for abatement for those types of sites. If we notice there's fires, they're close to home, usually the fire department will reach out. If it's usually crime, you know, PD will tell me we're going out to do X, Y, and Z, or oftentimes PD will clear the encampment and then call and say, this needs to be addressed. The hardest part for us is oftentimes neighbors will put up with certain things and they don't call us until it's too late. So if you're starting to see those types of issues, I tell people still call 311 and you can still reach out to me and CC your council office. Because what that does is the council office can make sure that PD has that on a log. What PD tells me is, okay, Olympia, the neighbor called you, but they've never called me before, right? So here I come wanting to abate something. And there are multiple stakeholders. You know, I have to deal with kind of the neighborhoods, people who are unhoused, advocates, etc., as I'm trying to make those decisions. And oftentimes it'll come down to PD saying, yeah, someone called 8 months ago, so I don't know how this is such an issue now. So call 311 and then email me and CC the council office, because that lets us know we need to look so I can follow with PD. We have regular meetings where we go down the list to try to address these types of issues, because these are not the kinds of things that we want to be occurring in neighborhoods.
And you mentioned behaviors. So people should be specific about when they're seeing fires, when they're seeing drug use, other behaviors that are concerned.
Prostitution, drug use, violence. Those are the kinds of things I need people to call PD about, because that's oftentimes what I need to be able to say, okay, these are the kinds of issues coming up from the neighborhood. And usually the officers will go out and say, hey, we were out here last night, we did X, Y, and Z, and this place is going to need to move for various reasons. Or they'll tell people they have to leave that area because it's dangerous.
Okay. Thanks, Olympia. Great. I think we got to all of the questions. I hope I didn't miss any, but this was great. We really put you on the hot seat. Thank you.
Definitely.
So much. Yeah, no, this was great. Anything you want to leave people with? I think you gave us a lot of great information and inspiration tonight, but any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts, get engaged, listen to the best part about, I hate to say, but if there's any win out of, let's not let a good pandemic go to waste. Listen into council meetings on Tuesday, call in or write to your council members so they know what you're seeing. I tell people I have a really good staff, but San Jose has a lot of streets and roads and we don't see everything. Get engaged with your neighborhood association or form one. Work with the council office to form a neighborhood association and then apply for a grant. We give out $5,000 grants for neighbors that want to beautify that dirt lot that says you turn into the neighborhood. If you want to put some flowers there and take care of it, I'll let you. If you want to put a mural on a wall, usually I just sign off and say, go ahead and put it up, and I graffiti code it. So do those types of things. Utilize services, use the free junk pickup program, use San Jose 311. When something gets stuck in the system, reach out and tell me. Oftentimes people will take a screenshot of next door and send it to me, because oftentimes that's how I know what's going on, and I'll send someone down to address an issue. Advocate for clean parks, advocate for quality of life and neighborhood livability in our community. That is the only thing that's going to make it better. And while I know that homelessness is a challenge for us, it'll probably be the largest challenge that most large cities in America will face, that we also have to understand what we as housed residents contribute to that. Let's get rid of things appropriately. That goes a long way. But I would like to encourage you to continue to attend these types of conversations with your council member. It's a great way to learn. As I always tell myself, as many of you that know me personally, I'm a fiscal conservative. How are my tax dollars being spent? This is a good way to know how your tax dollars are being spent. And thank you, Councilmember Mahan and staff, for inviting me this evening.
Oh, it was our pleasure. Thank you, Olympia, for everything you do. Your level of passion and service to the community. I know you work extremely hard, and I know how much you care. So we appreciate you joining us and spending some time answering all these questions. And we just look forward to continuing to work with you to make our city a cleaner, safer, more beautiful place. So thank you so much. Have a great evening. Take care.